The blue shutters of the Yamaha garage at the Chang International Circuit didn't just open for a test session, they opened on a new era, one born out of desperation. For decades, Yamaha's identity was the inline four, smooth, agile, surgical. But as the 2026 preseason dawned, that legacy was dead. In its place sat a machine that sounded like a weapon of war, the all-new YZR M1 V4. The air in Buriram was thick, not just with the 35 degrees C heat, but with a palpable, heavy tension. This wasn't just a bike change, it was a multi-million-dollar admission that the old ways were no longer enough to stop the Ducati juggernaut. And sitting in the center of this storm was the man Yamaha had bet their entire future on, Toprak Razgatlioglu. The Turkish superstar, a three-time world SBK king, wasn't just here to ride, he was here to tame a beast that had already shown a violent streak. During the earlier Sepang shakedown, the V4 project had been rocked by mechanical failures that left engines shattered and engineers scrambling for answers. Now in Thailand, the stakes were even higher. Toprak sat on the bike, his eyes fixed on the pit exit, knowing that every lap he took was a step into the unknown. He was a rider famous for defying the laws of physics with his stoppy entries, but the V4 was a machine that demanded its own set of rules. As the engine roared to life, a sound more like a fighter jet than a motorcycle, the telemetry monitors began to spike, revealing a reality that the engineers in Japan hadn't prepared for. As the session began, Toprak didn't ease into the program, he attacked it. In Sector 1, where the Chang circuit demands the most brutal deceleration, the Turkish rider began to reveal why he is nicknamed Toprak. On the second day of testing, his approach shifted from adaptation to pure aggression. He was applying extreme braking loads, forcing the front end of the V4 into the asphalt with a violence that made the mechanics wince. He was testing the chassis balance under drastic load shifts, a critical area for the V4. Unlike the old inline 4, which flowed through corners, the V4 is a hammer. It's designed to stop, turn, and explode out of the corner. But Toprak was taking it further. He was searching for the point where the frame would flex and the tires would quit. Within just a few laps, the data was staggering. He was pushing the front-end stability to a level the prototype hadn't yet experienced. Inside the garage, the mood was a mix of awe and anxiety. Technical director Massimo Bartolini watched the screens as Toprak's braking markers moved deeper and deeper into the corner. The V4's high torque and explosive character were meeting Toprak's high-risk style head-on. It was a symbiotic struggle. The machine was fighting to stay upright and the man was fighting to keep it pinned. He was finding the limit, but as the rear tire began to lift and the front end vibrated under the immense pressure, it became clear that the limit was starting to bite back. By mid-morning, a new problem began to surface. While Toprak could make the bike stop, the way it wanted to leave the corner was a different story. The V4 engine, in its rawest form, was displaying an aggressive, unpredictable character. In the high-speed transitions, the power delivery felt less like a tool and more like an enemy. The conflict was invisible to the cameras but loud in the telemetry. The engine's torque was so explosive that it was overwhelming the electronics, leading to unpredictable power distribution that threatened to spit the rider off. This was the ghost in the machine, the technical gap between Yamaha's smooth racing DNA and the raw violence of a V4 configuration. Toprak spent over an hour huddled with his engineers, gesturing wildly with his hands to describe the snap he felt at initial throttle opening. This wasn't just a mapping issue, it was a fundamental clash of philosophies. The engineers had built a powerhouse, but Toprak was telling them it was unusable. The afternoon session was looming, and with it, a test that would prove if this project was a masterpiece of engineering or a million-dollar disaster that would leave Yamaha at the back of the grid. As the sun reached its zenith, the track temperature in Buriram soared. This was the kill zone for tires. Most teams retreated to the shade, but Yamaha sent Toprak out for a long-run simulation. This was the ultimate endurance trial for the new package. Could the V4 handle 12 consecutive laps at race pace without destroying its rear Michelin? The tension in the garage was suffocating. Every lap Toprak completed was a data point in a high-stakes experiment. He was working on throttle mapping and traction control, trying to smooth out the transition from mid-corner to exit. On the monitors, his lap times were eerily consistent, a testament to his mental discipline, but the bike was moving. It was sliding on corner exits, a controlled but violent dance that used every inch of the Thai curbs. Technical scouts from Ducati and KTM were spotted lingering near the Yamaha garage, their eyes glued to the Sector 3 timing screens. They weren't just watching a rookie, they were watching a threat. Toprak was managing the rear tire degradation in a way that defied the aggressive reputation of the V4 engine. He was forcing the electronics to adapt to him, rather than the other way around. But one mistake in this heat, one slip of the wrist on an unripe engine, and the entire development cycle could be set back by months. Every time Toprak returned to the pits, the Paddock Whispers grew louder. The communication within the Yamaha garage had become a focal point of the test. Toprak wasn't just giving feedback, he was conducting an orchestra. He spent minutes analyzing the telemetry, comparing his seat-of-the-pants feel to the digital lines on the screen. His obsession was the initial throttle opening, the precise millisecond when the power meets the pavement. He was demanding more progressive delivery, a request that forced the engineers to rewrite code on the fly. The pressure was immense. In a world where thousandths of a second cost millions, Toprak's feedback was the only thing standing between a championship contender and a failed project. But there was a deeper drama unfolding. While Toprak was being hailed as the golden boy of the V4 project, the other side of the garage felt the chill. Speculation was beginning to surface that the bike's development was shifting almost entirely toward Toprak's extreme style, leaving his teammates to wonder where they fit in. The telemetry was showing a technical breakthrough, but Toprak's face as he removed his helmet told a different story, the story of a man who knew the bike was still a long way from being a winner. Then in the final hour of day 2 it happened, a breakthrough that silenced the critics. Toprak went out for one last high-intensity run. The technical team had finally found a common ground in the throttle mapping. Suddenly the bike looked different. The acceleration from the slow corners of Sector 2 appeared cleaner, and the corrections Toprak had to make were minimal. He wasn't just fighting the bike anymore, he was weaponizing it. The V4's power was no longer unpredictable, it was progressive. This gave Toprak the confidence to open the throttle earlier than any Yamaha rider had dared in years. He was revealing the potential of the project, turning a raw prototype into a precision tool. The lap times, though not officially released, sent a shockwave through the paddock. Reports suggested that his pace in the final sectors was on par with the leading Ducatis. Yamaha finally had their weapon. The spirit of challenge that the factory had preached was finally visible on the asphalt. But the breakthrough came with a warning. The V4 was now fast, but it was also at its absolute mechanical limit. The rest of the paddock was already watching, and they knew that Yamaha was no longer just a participant. They were hunters. As the sun set over the Chang International Circuit, the Yamaha garage felt different. The heavy tension of the morning had been replaced by a quiet, focused resolve. The Buriram test wasn't just another session, it was a strategic step that changed the championship narrative for 2026. Toprak Razgatlioglu had successfully navigated the most difficult 2 days of his career. He had taken an unripe V4 engine and forced it to speak his language, but as he spoke to the media, his tone was one of caution. "It's my mind that has to adapt," he admitted. He knew that while the bike had improved, the gap to the front was still a mountain to climb. The era of the inline-4 was gone, buried under the screams of the new V4. Yamaha had gambled everything on this technical revolution and on the shoulders of one man. The message to the grid was clear. The sleeping giant had woken up and it was armed with a Turkish predator. But as the teams packed up for the next test, one question remained. Could the engine that broke in Sepang and found its soul in Buriram survive the 22-round war that was about to begin? Would you like me to generate a high-retention SEO pack, including a viral title and description for this script?